All right, welcome. It's time for us to talk all the big issues making the rounds across the globe and in Nigeria. Welcome to the program, The Desk on Global Television. My name is Anthony Momodi. We're deeply sorry for starting 2 minutes behind schedule due to some technical issues as we ensure that you get the very best of production. All right, on today's edition, as usual, we'll be touchlighting very key issues making the round across the globe, and today is no different. And we've got issues coming out from South Korea, where we'll be looking at issues making rounds there as regards the issue of talking about South Korea. The South Korea's opposition leader has warned his ruling party colleagues on Friday that history will remember if they do not back the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol with just 24 hours until a vote to remove him from office. Yoon's short-lived imposition of South Korea's first martial law in over 4 decades plunged the country into vibrant and combative democracy into some of its worst political turmoil in years. An attempt to remove him from office last Saturday failed when lawmakers from the ruling power party boycotted the impeachment motion. But after a week of backdoor politicking and mounting investigation into Yoon's and his inner circles, analysts now say the main opposition Democratic Party may have better luck with its second attempt. All right, so that's going to be the base of one of our conversation. Don't forget that during a live televised by the president, he did introduce the martial law, and the martial law simply means substitution of democratic laws using military rules and dictatorship to, enforce rules. And this time around, it meant that they were not allowed to have political gatherings by the Legislative House, and other ways of stifling the opposition was what the president did. So we'll be looking at the consequences of that and why this is playing out in such a country like South Korea. And I will also be looking at other issues making the rounds. We'll come back home. We've got a very disturbing report, a new report that has shown that over 500 million children under 5 globally have been registered at birth in the past 5 years. But the report by the United Nations Children's Fund indicates that significant progress has been made in global effort to secure legal identities for children. And the report titled Right Start in Life, Global Levels and Trends in Birth Registration shows that despite the increase in the number of registered children, about 150 million children still remain unregistered and are also invisible to government systems. So we'll be looking at the implication of this fact that we've got as much as that amount, 150 million children still remain unregistered and unaccounted for. So we'll be looking at how to stop this very ugly trend. From there, we'll be taking into other issues and making the rounds. Today promises to be exciting. I've got 2 women who will be digging it out, helping us to give us very balanced analysis of all the big talking points. In the live studios, I've got Dr. Aisha Shaibu, who is a political analyst, will be helping us look at issues closely. While we've got via Zoom, we'll be having Barrister Balasin, who will be joining us to also give us her own perspective to the different issues we'll be looking at on today's edition of the program, The Desk. We'll go for a very quick break. When we return from this break, we'll be hitting the discuss button as we do analysis of all the trending talking points. All right, welcome back here from the break. I almost said it's Talk Sport, it's the desk, and we're looking at current affairs issues. And we've got joining us via Zoom, we've got the CEO of House of Justice, no other person but Barrister Gloria Mabian Balasin Esquire, joining us via Zoom to help us look at issues. Good evening, Barrister Gloria. Thank you for joining us on the desk.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
All right, great to have a lawyer talking current affairs this evening. It means we're going to get very deep analysis. Let's begin from South Korea, where the issue of martial law, which was introduced some weeks ago by the President Yoon, using the military authoritarian force to, force leadership in South Korea. How do you feel when we see the short change from democratic setting to the military way of life just to ensure that you quell the opposition? How does this affect democratic tendencies and tenets?
Well, increasingly, we are seeing a drift from democracy back to military rule. In Africa, we have 3 states that have now fallen back to military rule. And now we see South Korea, a country in which in many forms the assumption is that their democracy is crystallized to such a form that they will not be discussing martial law. But then again, we see that is the situation. This is quite unfortunate because what it means is if people are moving towards military rule where many states have emerged from, it means that democracy is not yielding the dividends that it promises to the states. And I think that there needs to be a rejigging and a recalibration of how democracy is practiced across states, not just in Africa, but in a state like South Korea. Incidentally, they will be going to the polls to vote. They would need about 200 votes to decide whether they are going to topple the ruling party, the People's Powers Party. But that will be a tall order indeed. However, it will be a welcome development if the opposition party, the Democratic Party, is able to marshal the people to topple back this martial law that has come to want to impeach the Constitution. Democracy may have its own challenges, but it is clear that in comparison to other forms of government that have been used over time, democracy still has the highest promise delivered. And I think that it's important that the people of South Korea revisit this, no matter what the challenges are, so that they can move towards a better future, not just for themselves, but for their children.
All right, hold on. I've got Dr. Aisha Shaibu in the studio. Dr. Aisha, looking at what Barrister Gloria has just kicked off with, do you think it's about just having selfish leaders? Because obviously the South Korean president did this because he wanted to quell the opposition. Now, first of all, there was first attempt to impeach him, which didn't succeed. Do you think just because he's desperate to ensure that they do not gather to impeach him, that's why that martial law, he deliberately brought it into bed? And do you think he's going to succeed?
Obviously, it appears so. Most times, some of our leaders, not limiting it to Africa this time around, globally, tend to have their personal interest first. Of course, the opposition party is the one taking lead in this attempt to oust him. Yeah. Then the question now is, what is the view of the citizens of South Korea? What is their impression about the president? Is he meeting with the obligations of the office? Is he allowing dividend of democracy to spread? If this is being ascertained, then we can now begin to look at it from the political point of view, where the opposition wants to oust him and emerge by all means possible. But if that is not the case, then we begin to look at the intent of the resurrection of the martial law. Oh. What are the tenets of it? What is the ideal behind revoking or evoking the martial law? Is it to, like you opined, to subdue, to silence opposition, or to, by extension, silence the citizens who are having disaffection with his policies?
All right, let's wrap up the conversation on South Korea. For you, legally speaking, Barrister Gloria, do you think that mere attempt by the president by invoking the martial law is enough to make the people and also the opposition party do all it can to oust him from office? Remember that the South Korea's opposition leader has warned his ruling party colleagues that this Friday, history will remember if they do not back the impeachment of the president. The first time they failed, do you think the second time they would succeed?
Will succeed. The president is being charged under the Insurrectionary Act for undermining constitutional order. And the Constitution is not just a list of suggestions or a bulky document. It is an expression of the will of the people. And it is for that reason that all constitutions begin with an expression of that collective will in the form of we the people. And so South Korea's citizens now has an opportunity to make a clear statement whether they want a kind of government where they own their voice or whether they want to cede that voice to military rule. I think also that many people tend to want to experiment on what they have not experienced. Many people who live today, particularly the young people, did not experience military rule. So they do not know what it means to lack the freedom of expression. They do not know what it means to have a situation where the Constitution is respected in breach rather than in compliance. And so they want to try those things and see. No matter what the challenges are, I think it's important for people to know that any government where the people have the most power and they own the highest voice is a more secured government than one in which they can only take orders. But again, at the end of the day, it will be about what the votes say, because whatever the expression of that vote would be a clear outcome of what the people feel. If democracy, which by the way is a process, not an outcome, the outcome being good governance, if democracy in South Korea is not paying them, then of course they will want to try other things. We can only wish them good luck, but we hope that this trend stops there so that we can have a more vibrant government where the people have the say.
All right, well said there. We wish the people of South Korea good luck, according to Barrister Gloria. Let's move on to the next talking point on the desk. A new report has shown that over 500 million children under 5-year-old now, globally have been registered at birth in the past 5 years. The report by the United Nations Children's Fund indicates that significant progress has been made in global efforts to secure the legal identities of children. The report, titled Right Start in Life, Global Levels and Trends in Birth Registration, shows that despite the increase in the number of registered children, about 150 million children still remain unregistered and invisible to government systems. It also highlighted that over 50 million children with registered birth lack birth certificates, which is an essential document for proving legal identity, acquiring nationality, and accessing health care, education, and protection. The Executive Director of UNICEF, Catherine Russell, expressed concerns over the millions of children who remain unregistered, rendering them invisible in the eyes of the government and legal system. Dr. Aisha, how do you think this would affect this generation of children that, to government, they do not exist?
It is a very serious issue because it infringes on their fundamental human rights. They have a right to be catered for, cared for, provided for. So where their names are missing, to God knows where, it means they are already out of the system. And I'm surprised that even in a saner climb where we expect that things are done rightly, correctly, from this report now, we are made to understand that about 50 million from that axis is equally off the radar. That is quite surprising, to say the least. But coming back to sub-Saharan Africa, it is already something that is normal. It's a norm in our system. Because as we speak, you go to your various local government villages, hamlets, you could see that they lack the presence of healthcare facilities. And when we come to Population Commission, that is another different ballgame, because I don't even know when last we had such exercise in this country.
Talking about census.
Census, because we are the largest, black race in the continent. Yet, we lack some of these basic things. And it calls to question, are we really the lion of Africa? Because if you put the African population into perspective, Nigeria has the highest. Yet, we have the minute of all these facilities. So, until we are able to wake up to reality, some of these things will continue to exist. And it's unfortunate, the children that are off the radar, I don't think they bargain for this. So, let us question our sensibility in this aspect. We need to go back to the drawing table. We need to do the right things. Sometimes, some of these things are theoretically done. They bring a budget, they submit bill, they do what not. But when it comes to the practical dispensation of these exercises, we are found wanting. So we need to look at it and give these children the due recognition they deserve.
All right, Barrister Gloria, let's look at, we know that education, health, some of the basic things these children have right to. How does this affect their future? And also, looking at the speed of insecurity in Nigeria, the sub-Saharan Africa, and the globe as a whole, what does this mean to the world in terms of the danger of having such children not in the system, both legally, health-wise, and every other facet of our national lives?
The reality is that we cannot account for what we can't count. And if we are not able to know the number of our children, then how can we account for them in terms of providing care, whether in putting the numbers or putting the facilities together? So it's quite troubling. But like Dr. Shuaibu said, this is not an unusual happening in Africa. In most villages, the births of children are not recorded. And this is not such a technical thing that cannot be attended to. What it just requires is for the local government, sphere of government, to provide certificates and a place to just register births in each village, so that there is the ability to count the number of children who are being born. But then again, when it comes to politics, and this is not just speaking about Nigeria, but across various countries, the rules of the game continue to change based on what people want to achieve. And so the numbers shrink or are expanded depending on what the politicians want. And so they would not want actual figures, they will want contrived figures. But as the world evolves, it's important that we think about children with more seriousness than we do. I believe that it is the duty of adults everywhere to take care of children anywhere. And when we think about children, it is the continuity of our species, which now makes it imperative that we don't look at them just in terms of digits, but we look at them as the extension of what the world could be. So when we look at education, for instance, the world, the more developed countries are thinking in terms of ICT, in terms of going to the moon and the space, and doing phenomenal things. But here we don't even have the children accounted for. How will they then be able to even know that they have an identity which would give them the anchorage to proceed to be global citizens? So these things, as much as we sometimes discountenance them, are serious issues that speak to the root of the speed of development that happens in African countries. But now that we also know that even in developed countries, that this is an issue, then there must be a global response to this. And that global response begins first by recognition of the primacy of children in our lives. Because for most people, the idea is that children are just a set of inconvenience or just something to tick the boxes. But if we realize how serious children are, then we're going to provide the resources, we're going to count them, we're going to account for them, and we're going to ensure that they become real pointers to how better the world can be in terms of the kind of facilities we put at their disposal.
All right, thank you very much, ladies. Let's go to the next talking point on our desk. We've got the state police is where we're hitting next. As governors, especially Governor Uba Sani of Kaduna State on Thursday said 36 states of the Federation have endorsed the creation of state police following the submission of their reports to the National Economic Council. The governor said this while briefing State House correspondent at the end of the 147th NEC meeting chaired by Vice President Kashim Shettima. Dr. Aisha, this must be good news, the fact that 36 state governors have okayed creation of state police. But are you worried in terms of how it would be funded, the abuse of the state police, and other issues surrounding state policing?
Well, like I've always said, when you put it in theory, it will sound so interesting, so robust. But when you want to practicalize it in this part of the world, reverse becomes the case. Of course, if we want to look at it, the question is going to be, what would the governors do differently from what they are doing at the moment, even when the policing activities is not under the state control? So you can imagine what will happen next if the police is under the state governors. At the moment, whenever they have a disagreement with an opposition or during election, you see the activities of the Nigerian police. So glaring. And again, you talk about funding. That is another burden.
But they've got security vote, which before now is not accounted for. Now they should have a reason to use the security vote.
It is a contradiction to what we are talking about. Reason being that when the security vote was coming, there was no state security, yet they could not account for it. And what makes you think they will do something with that security vote when they have state police, policing, where they can have total authority to subject silence? I don't know the rationale behind some of the activities of our leaders. Anyway, somebody said until you get there, you wouldn't know how to pilot it. Because looking at it from the outside, you see so many loopholes that needed to be covered. Why would a governor receive security votes and sit on it where there are insecurities everywhere within the state? It calls for questioning. But if they can do justice to it, if they can be generous enough to utilize the resources given to them in that aspect, then something meaningful might come out of it. That is number one. Number two, if they can discharge their duties as state police without unnecessary pressure from the governor, without hijacking the control, without influence, then we can have positive results. But I bet you a time will come, we'll still come back here to discuss this the moment they start implementing the state policing. All right,
Barrister Balisin, let's look at the fact that before this came into being, the Inspector General of Police, we've got Kayode Egbetukun, was not in support of state policing. He says Nigeria wasn't ripe for it. He was blunt about this issue. We've seen issues of some governors, even ex-governors, who are now in the presidency, who seem to use federal might to suppress incumbent governors. How do you see this playing out at the end of the day when this finally kicks off? Are you worried?
Well, to that I would say another question and say, what is the state police going to do that the federal police is not already doing? Okay, are we more interested in the form
because
or the outcome?
the talk is that state policing is going to be closer to the people. The police officers are likely to be people from that locality, so they would be able to fish out criminal elements and know the good from the bad.
I don't think that is one way or the other. Incidentally, I designed a course titled Policing Behavior and Control Measures at the Nigerian Defense Academy Postgraduate School. And part of the research that my students and I did not reflect that if we have state police, that is going to dramatically change the effect of security. Because if you look at the present situation, and I think Dr. Shuaibu highlighted it, many times when there are security challenges in states, the governors will say, but the police is not under our domain. However, when they want to attack their opponents, somehow they find the magic to have the police to be able to carry out their own actions. We've seen it everywhere. And very recently, the present governor of Zamfara State accused his immediate predecessor, who is now a minister, about insecurity and being directly, being indicted in the matter. So at the end of the day, it's not about the form. What we're looking for is the substance. And the major challenge, particularly tying it down to security votes, is how we politicize everything, including security. In other saner climes, what you would find is, if people have been given money to cater for security, and what you have as outcome is insecurity, not security, they will have to account for the money. But here it is unaccounted for. So I don't know how they intend to actually find the money for them to run security, when already many of them are complaining that the budgets and the federal allocation to the states is insufficient for them. I think that it is important that they deal with what is on their plate for now, and to be able to discharge those obligations properly. By the way, security is not just kinetics. Insecurity is also largely contributed by the inability of leaders to ensure economic viability, to ensure jobs, and to just ensure that the society thrives in a proper way. So if they're able to run the state in such a way that the states can thrive, then the issue of insecurity will not even be a challenge. Unfortunately, we would find that in the last local government elections, almost all the governors decided to do 10/10, deciding on the way that the local government elections outcome would be. In Kaduna State, where Obasani leads, there was not even election, there was declaration. And with that, what you will find is the people who will be aggrieved that they are not even allowed to express who they want as their local government chairman, who, by the way, are those who are closer to them at the grassroots. So again, we go back to the word contradiction. They do not want local government chairmen who will be closer to the people, but they want state police because they feel that the state police will be closer to the people. That's neither here nor there. So we need to have a situation where, when we discuss issue around governance, that there is more sincerity and commitment on the part of the leaders, rather than just wanting to have different things happening at different times, just trial and error. I think that the way the police is structured at the moment can be recalibrated and revamped in such a way that it will address directly to the security issues that exist. But the governors should pay more attention at ensuring economic viability in their states, and also ensuring people have the proper jobs, and also ensure that the people are paid the minimum wage. The other part of the security, which they think is a challenge, will naturally take care of itself.
The electronic transmission of result. INEC is seeking legal clarity to phase out PVC, and also is looking at diaspora voting. That means the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Mahmood, has said the commission would, among other things, seek legal clarification as regards the transmission of result. And looking at diaspora voting and all that, and saying the PVC shouldn't be the only source of one to vote. Legally speaking, do you think we're on the right path? And do you see this changing, being a game changer for our electoral process?
I'm sorry, I lost you a bit. Could you come again?
All right. INEC is saying they intend to get legal clarification as regards electronic transmission of results, and also saying they are looking at phasing out PVC as the only document to ensure that one can vote. And I'm asking, legally speaking, if they do get the legal clarity, do you think we're on the right process where diaspora voting can also come to be?
Well, we look forward to such a time where there can be diaspora voting, because it's important that no national is disenfranchised. But when we come to INEC and the issue of clarity, there is a deja vu to it. Don't forget that before the PVC, there was the card readers. Sure. And there was all of the assurance that the card readers was going to be the magic one that will deal directly with all the questions on irregularity of elections. Then we moved from there to PVC, and again there was the assurance that PVC was the be-all and end-all. They demonstrated to us how that it has worked in other countries, and it was almost like they were giving 1,000% assurance that it was going to work. But then the last election showed that what we need with our electoral system is not so much all of this innovation as character reform. Speaking to which, we would have to call out INEC, because you see, it's important that we even shift the jurisprudence of the law to such a point where the honors to prove regularity or irregularity of an election should lie with INEC, because it has become so difficult. In fact, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than someone who has been cheated out of elections to be able to prove his point in court, because sometimes even the INEC would not even cooperate to give the right evidence for the person to present it and to gain justice in the court. The timeline is short. The INEC is not cooperating. INEC sometimes becomes the main enabler of ensuring that elections do not work out well. They will not redeploy the last materials at the right time, and they will also not train their people properly. They will sometimes even enable those who want to rig elections to have their way. Let's take Plateau State as an example. If you look at how the legislators' elections was overturned, INEC had already allowed people to vote and go to the polls and vote, only for the courts to then decide and say that there were internal issues with PDP, which made the candidates who stood for elections disqualified. But already INEC had put their names on the polling papers and for people, what they assume is that if you put a name or a party name on the paper, on the ballot paper, the assumption is that regularity is there. So INEC has not been able to do the proper homework. INEC will make an assurance and say they're putting a spend benchmark for which people should not exceed, but then they will not follow through on it. INEC will make assurance and say that they are going to use the PVC, then they will not use the PVC. So I think that the mind games should come to an end. INEC needs to look at the person in the mirror and understand that, listen, the challenge with irregularity in elections heavily lies on INEC, and it's not an issue of PVC or card reader anymore. Is INEC willing to put in the work of integrity to ensure that elections in Nigeria are credible and proper? That is the question that they need to answer. Any other thing after that, no matter what the innovations are, we're not going to get to a point where we have credible elections, except if there is integrity in INEC. At the moment, the last election does not show that they have passed that test properly.
All right, thank you, Barrister Gloria. We urge you to kindly rejoin us in a few minutes as we restart. And just while we're hoping she would rejoin us in a few minutes, just to get your take before going for a quick break, in terms of INEC, now what INEC is proposing the fact that PVC shouldn't be the only requirement for one to get voting. Do you think that's a positive move from INEC? And also the fact that diaspora voting, do you think we are also ripe for that part? And how do you think diaspora voting can also help us change the fortunes? And we're also talking about transmission of results via electronically. Do you see that working with the challenges of power and other issues?
That is the bane of discussion or contention. In the last election, we saw how it played out, despite all the promises like Barrister Gloria rightly opined. The promises we had was over the roof. To a very large extent, I had some level of conviction that, okay, it was going to nip all the issues concerning electoral fraud in the board. But to my greatest surprise, it appeared to even be the worst, preceding the other elections we've had in this country. And when you bring the Kogi State election into perspective, it becomes worse. So we were made to understand that we were going to do the transmission, but we could see where election results were already written before.
That's in Kogi elections that produced Ododo.
Yes, as at November 2023. Okay, we were seeing, thank God for social media activities and whatnot, we saw where election results were already preempted, uploaded before commencement of accreditation. And Dr. Barrister Gloria said something. The integrity of INEC is being questioned on a daily basis. And if you ask me, I'll tell you. When INEC released a press statement concerning a particular senatorial district of Kogi State in that election, it came out to say they were going to cancel that particular sectorial district because it was marred with a whole lot of irregularities. But barely 10 hours after the release of that press statement by the INEC Commission, INEC went ahead to do the opposite. After giving the assurance that people can still believe in their integrity. But what do? They turn around. Okay, when we talk about the smart card reader, it was tendered in the court.
Sorry.
What was the verdict of the court?
That's when Ajaka went to court now.
Exactly. So these things, as far as I'm concerned, it is all about the more you look, the less you see. It is all about a game. If it favors them, they try to bring the implementation of these policies into fruition. Where it does not, the abracadabra that will be involved will be so overwhelming. So who is deceiving who? We are not that gullible. Nigerians are well read, but the way and manner they toy with our sensibility is something that beats my imagination at all time. If INEC is to do due diligence, like they are saying now, do you know how much of Naira went into the process? What is the result? Okay, yes, diasporans are Nigerians. They are Nigerians living outside the shores of Nigeria. They have the right to exercise their franchise. But when the onus are down, would they actually do the right thing to make sure these things are actualized?
That's the big question.
That is the question.
We can answer. All right, as we wrap up the program, we'll have the last talking point. If we can do 2 minutes each by both, it's going to be fantastic. Next is the local government fund. As the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, T. Fagbemi, has warned state governors and local government executive against tampering with and mismanaging local government funds. He said in the light of the recent Supreme Court judgment guaranteeing the financial autonomy of local governments, such an action by any governor would amount to an act of gross misconduct, which can set the ground for removal from office. Fagbemi spoke on Thursday during the 2024 National Conference on the National Association of Judicial Correspondents. I don't know if Barrister Gloria is there. Can you do a 2-minute overhaul on this? Do you think it's something that would scare the state governors from tampering with the resources? All right. For you, do you think this is the right way to go? The Minister of Justice giving that stern warning that if you do touch the monies for the local government, you can lose your place, you could lose your office. Is that stringent enough?
That is how it's supposed to be. Ideally, that is the way it's supposed to go. But again, it calls to questioning. The question is, the individual state governors that rushed the moment that verdict was passed by the Supreme Court to conduct emergency election for the local government council, do you think they don't have ulterior motive for doing that? Like we all have agreed, it was more or less a selection process. There was no election. In my state, Kogi State, where I come from, we saw what played out. So many of us were not even given the opportunity to exercise our franchise. There are cases where you don't even see ballot boxes, you don't see ballot materials, but results will emerge. So, if Nigeria is going to turn into a one-party system, then we can say the activities of the governors as regards the local government chairman is being supported by the executive arm of the government, because they cannot tell me they didn't see all that happened, all that played out. All right? So I don't think practically the governors will hands off that fund, because they are so used to it. It's like taking milk from the mouth of an infant. That is what it means, sufficiently. So if we are going to go by what Attorney General of the Federation has said, then there should be need for 1, 2, 3 governors to be used as a litmus test or as a scapegoat in this case. Reason being that, Nigerians, we can do the right thing when pressured. If they want the governors to hands off the local government funds, then they should the implementation should be such that they put a very stringent monitoring tools to emphasize on the fact that due diligence is done. Where this is absent, we are back to the background where we are coming from. Like I said, most of our policies are theoretically based. When it comes to the practical, the result is always south.
But how key is the Supreme Court going to be in this to ensure that the state governors, because the Attorney General said they will be removed. It means, and we know that Supreme Court is the highest level where cases can be taken. Do you think the Supreme Court will be needed to help federal government achieve this aim, so that when cases are brought to them, they would do everything to back what the federal government is trying to achieve?
That is the problem. We have different arms of government to handle different issues. Okay? So there are so many institutions put in place to checkmate all these activities.
Okay. All right.
But they are found wanting.
All right, that's where we're going to draw the curtains on today's edition of the program. The desk. I want to say a big thank you to my guest in the live studio, in the person of Dr. Aisha Shuaibu, who has been super amazing, helping us look at issues, giving us a deep perspective from all the talking points we've shared from the global scene down to the national and sub-national level. Also, not forgetting Barrister Gloria Mabien Balasin, Esquire. She is the CEO of House of Justice. Actually, she did justice to all the talking points. I want to say thank you very much for joining me and making your debut on today's edition of the program, The Desk. My name is Anthony Momodu saying, hopefully next week, Monday, is going to be another exciting edition, and hopefully Dr. Aisha and Barrister Balisin will be joining us in the course of the week to help us look at issues making the rounds. Good evening.